Let's start with a bold truth that most people never hear. For decades, society has been flooded with myths, exaggerations, locker room stories, internet advertisements, and unrealistic expectations about penis size. Many men quietly carry anxiety, embarrassment, or insecurity because they believe they don't measure up. But here's the reality: most of what people believe about penis size is simply not supported by science. Medical research, anatomical studies, and sexual health data tell a very different story, one that is far more reassuring, far more accurate, and far more empowering. Today, we're going to break down the facts. What is actually considered average? Does size truly matter in sexual satisfaction? Why do so many men believe they are smaller than normal? And what does science really say about enlargement methods? Because once you understand the evidence, the fear, myths, and pressure surrounding penis size start to disappear. What if the biggest insecurity many men carry is actually based on a myth? For years, countless men have quietly worried about whether they are normal. They compare themselves to exaggerated images online, unrealistic portrayals in adult media, or stories they hear from friends. These comparisons slowly create a powerful belief that most other men are somehow bigger, better, or more adequate. But when science actually measures real bodies in real clinical studies, a very different picture appears. Large medical studies involving thousands of men across different countries have carefully measured penis size under controlled conditions. These studies were not based on guesses, self-reporting, or internet claims. They were conducted by medical professionals using standardized methods, and the results are remarkably consistent. The vast majority of men fall within a very similar range. In fact, when researchers compiled data from tens of thousands of measurements worldwide, they found that the average erect length is roughly around 5 to 5.5 inches. The average circumference is also within a fairly narrow range. That means most men cluster very close to this average. Only a small percentage fall significantly above or below it. Now here, where things become interesting. Many men who believe they are too small are actually perfectly average according to medical data. Their concern is not based on anatomy, it's based on perception. And perception is heavily influenced by what people see around them. The internet has created an environment where extreme examples are constantly displayed. Adult entertainment, for example, often selects performers specifically because they fall outside the average range. These individuals represent a tiny fraction of the population, yet they become the visual reference point for millions of viewers. Imagine if the only basketball players you ever saw were elite professional athletes. You might start believing that every man should be 6 feet 8 inches tall and capable of dunking a basketball. But in reality, professional athletes represent a tiny, highly selected group. The same distortion happens with body expectations. Another important factor is something called sampling bias. People tend to see or remember extreme examples more than average ones. The unusual stands out, while the normal fades into the background. Over time, this tricks the brain into thinking the extreme is actually common. This is why so many men underestimate how normal they really are. In fact, surveys show a fascinating pattern. While a large number of men believe they are below average, objective measurements reveal that most of them fall right in the middle of the normal range. The body hasn't changed, only the perception has. Think about that for a moment. Millions of men carry unnecessary anxiety simply because the reference points they are using are unrealistic. But the human body has always existed on a spectrum. Variation is natural. Just like height, hair color, or hand size, genital size varies from person to person. That variation is part of normal human biology. And when researchers look at the full distribution of measurements, they consistently find the same reassuring truth. The overwhelming majority of men are completely within the normal range. What if the secret to great sexual confidence has nothing to do with size at all? For many men, confidence becomes tied to a number they believe defines their masculinity. They assume that if that number were larger, everything else would fall into place: attraction, performance, satisfaction, and self-esteem. But when psychologists and sexual health researchers study confidence and intimacy, they repeatedly discover something surprising. Confidence rarely comes from physical measurements. It comes from mindset. Think about the people you've met in life who naturally command attention. Some are tall, some are short. Some fit conventional beauty standards, others don't, yet they all share one powerful trait: they carry themselves with certainty. They are comfortable in their own skin. That comfort is what people respond to. Now imagine two individuals in the same situation. One constantly doubts himself, worries about being judged, and focuses on perceived flaws. The other accepts his body, communicates openly, and approaches intimacy with curiosity rather than fear. Which one is more likely to create a positive, relaxed, and enjoyable experience? Confidence shapes behavior in subtle but powerful ways. It influences posture, communication, eye contact, humor, and emotional presence. These qualities play a much larger role in attraction and intimacy than a physical measurement hidden beneath clothing. But where does real confidence come from? One important source is knowledge. When people understand how the body actually works, many of their fears start to fade. Instead of relying on rumors, exaggerated media portrayals, or online myths, they begin to rely on facts. Another powerful source of confidence is communication. Healthy intimacy is built on openness between partners. Being able to talk about desires, comfort, boundaries, and pleasure creates a level of trust that physical attributes alone cannot provide. In fact, studies of long-term relationships consistently show that couples who communicate openly about intimacy report higher satisfaction than those who rely solely on physical assumptions. Confidence also grows when individuals stop viewing their body as something that must be compared to others. Comparison is a trap because there will always be someone taller, stronger, richer, or different in some way. When self-worth depends on comparison, it becomes fragile. But when confidence is built on self-acceptance, it becomes stable. Another fascinating element of confidence is how strongly it affects perception. Psychologists call this the confidence effect. When someone believes in themselves, others often perceive them more positively as well. This isn't about arrogance or pretending to be perfect. It's about being comfortable with who you are. And comfort is contagious. When someone approaches intimacy without anxiety or self-criticism, it creates a more relaxed environment for both partners. That relaxation allows curiosity, exploration, humor, and emotional connection to develop naturally. Ironically, the more someone obsesses over measurements, the more pressure they create for themselves. Pressure leads to anxiety, and anxiety can interfere with performance, enjoyment, and connection. But when the focus shifts away from measurement and toward confidence, communication, and understanding, the entire experience changes. What if the beliefs many people have about the human body were shaped not by science, but by powerful myths repeated over and over again? Think about how easily a message becomes accepted as truth when it is repeated frequently enough. Advertising, social media, movies, and online content all have the ability to shape perception. Over time, certain ideas start to feel normal simply because we see them everywhere. But popularity does not equal accuracy, and when it comes to body expectations, myths often become louder than facts. One of the most powerful myths surrounding male anatomy is the idea that bigger automatically means better. This message appears constantly in jokes, advertisements, and exaggerated online content. It's presented as if it were a universal rule. The problem is that when medical researchers study sexual health and satisfaction, the evidence rarely supports this simplistic claim. So why do these myths spread so easily? Part of the reason lies in human psychology. People are naturally drawn to extremes. A shocking headline, an exaggerated claim, or a dramatic promise grabs attention much faster than a calm explanation supported by data. If someone sees a headline promising dramatic enlargement or instant results, it sparks curiosity, even if the claim has no scientific foundation. This is exactly why the internet is filled with products and advice that promise unrealistic transformations. Pills, creams, devices, and exercises are marketed with bold guarantees, often using before and after images or testimonials designed to create hope. But when researchers examine these claims through controlled studies, the results usually fail to support the promises. Another reason myths spread is because they are rarely challenged in everyday conversations. Many people feel uncomfortable discussing sexual health openly, which allows misinformation to circulate without correction. When topics are surrounded by silence or embarrassment, myths can grow unchecked. Imagine hearing the same exaggerated story repeatedly from different sources: a friend, a movie, an online forum, or an advertisement. Even if the story is inaccurate, repetition can slowly make it feel believable. Psychologists refer to this as the illusion of truth effect, where repeated statements are more likely to be accepted as true, regardless of evidence. And once a myth becomes widely accepted, it can influence how people view themselves. Someone might start comparing their own body to unrealistic portrayals and conclude that something must be wrong, even when they are perfectly normal according to medical standards. The reality revealed by scientific research is much less dramatic, but far more accurate. Human anatomy varies naturally, and most people fall within a relatively consistent range. Studies examining sexual satisfaction repeatedly highlight factors like emotional connection, communication, and mutual understanding as far more influential than extreme physical characteristics. Facts, however, tend to move more quietly than myths. Scientific research requires careful measurement, peer review, and cautious interpretation. It does not promise miracles or overnight transformations. Because of that, factual information often feels less sensational than exaggerated claims. But understanding the difference between myth and evidence is incredibly powerful. When people begin to question the messages they see online and start looking at what research actually shows, many long-held insecurities begin to lose their grip. What if the thing many people focus on the most is actually the thing that matters the least? For years, conversations about intimacy have often centered around physical measurements, as if one specific characteristic determines everything about sexual satisfaction. But when researchers start asking couples what truly creates fulfilling experiences, the answers are rarely about size. Instead, they consistently point toward something much deeper: connection. Connection is the invisible element that transforms intimacy from a physical act into a meaningful experience. Think about how attraction works in real life. It's rarely based on a single physical detail. Instead, it grows from a mixture of emotional comfort, trust, curiosity, laughter, and communication. When two people feel safe and understood with each other, their ability to experience pleasure and satisfaction often increases dramatically. Now imagine the opposite situation. Two people might have perfect physical compatibility on paper, but if communication is missing, if one person feels anxious or disconnected, or if there is pressure instead of trust, the experience can quickly become awkward or unsatisfying. This is why researchers studying long-term relationships repeatedly highlight emotional intimacy as one of the strongest predictors of sexual satisfaction. When partners feel comfortable expressing what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and what they would like to explore together, the entire dynamic changes. Instead of guessing or worrying about performance, both people can focus on learning about each other. That process of discovery is incredibly powerful. In fact, many experts in sexual health emphasize that intimacy is more like a conversation than a performance. It evolves through feedback, curiosity, and attention to each other's responses. Small adjustments, shared humor, and mutual understanding often create far more pleasure than focusing on physical characteristics alone. Another important factor is arousal. The human body responds strongly to emotional and psychological stimulation. Feeling desired, appreciated, and connected can enhance physical sensation in ways that pure anatomy cannot. For example, when someone feels relaxed and emotionally engaged, the body is more likely to respond naturally. Blood flow increases, sensitivity improves, and the experience becomes more enjoyable for both partners. But when anxiety or insecurity enters the picture, the body may react differently. Stress can interfere with arousal, focus, and comfort. This is why connection plays such a crucial role. Connection reduces pressure. It replaces self-consciousness with curiosity. Instead of wondering whether you measure up to some imaginary standard, the focus shifts toward understanding your partner and sharing the moment together. There's also an important anatomical reality that many people overlook. In many cases, the areas responsible for the most intense sensations are located closer to the entrance rather than deep inside the body. This means that communication, rhythm, and attentiveness often matter far more than extreme length or size. When couples learn to prioritize connection, they often discover that satisfaction grows naturally. They laugh more, experiment more, and become more comfortable with each other over time. And that comfort creates a powerful cycle. The more connected people feel, the more confident they become, and the more enjoyable intimacy tends to be. What if the biggest factor shaping how you feel about your body isn't your body at all, but your mind? Many people assume that confidence automatically comes from physical traits. They believe that if they could change one feature, improve one measurement, or match some imagined standard, their insecurities would disappear. But when psychologists study body image and self-perception, they consistently find that the mind plays a far greater role than anatomy. The way you think about your body can dramatically influence how you feel about it. Consider this: two individuals can have almost identical physical characteristics, yet one may feel confident while the other feels deeply insecure. The difference isn't in the body itself, the difference lies in perception. Human perception is not a perfect mirror of reality. It is shaped by experiences, comparisons, cultural messages, and personal beliefs. When someone repeatedly hears that a certain body type is ideal, they may start evaluating themselves through that narrow lens. Even if they fall within a completely normal range, they may still feel inadequate simply because they believe the standard is higher. This is where the mind becomes incredibly powerful. Psychologists often describe a phenomenon known as negative self-focus. When someone begins to fixate on a perceived flaw, their attention constantly returns to it. The brain starts scanning for evidence that supports the insecurity while ignoring information that contradicts it. Over time, this creates a distorted picture. Imagine looking into a mirror every day and focusing only on one small detail you dislike. Eventually, that detail can start to feel much larger and more important than it actually is. The same thing happens when people evaluate their bodies based on unrealistic expectations. Another interesting aspect of the mind is how strongly it responds to comparison. Humans are naturally wired to compare themselves with others as a way of understanding where they fit within a group. But in the modern world, those comparisons are often based on highly selective images rather than real-life averages. When someone repeatedly compares themselves to extreme examples, the brain begins to treat those extremes as normal reference points. And once that reference point shifts, perfectly typical bodies may start to feel abnormal. But here's the powerful part: perception can also change in the opposite direction. When people learn accurate information about the body and begin to challenge unrealistic standards, their internal narrative can shift. Instead of constantly asking, "Am I good enough?" they start recognizing that their expectations were distorted in the first place. Confidence grows when the mind stops treating the body as a problem that needs to be fixed. Another factor that shapes confidence is self-talk, the quiet conversation people have with themselves every day. When that internal voice is critical, judgmental, or filled with doubt, it can slowly erode self-esteem. But when it becomes more balanced and realistic, it can strengthen confidence over time. The mind also has an extraordinary ability to influence performance and experience. When someone approaches intimacy with anxiety or self-doubt, their focus often shifts inward. Instead of being present in the moment, they may become preoccupied with how they are being perceived. That mental distraction can interfere with enjoyment and connection. But when the mind becomes calmer and more accepting, attention shifts outward again. People become more aware of their partner, more engaged in the moment, and more capable of responding naturally to the experience. What if the one thing that could eliminate most insecurities about the body was something incredibly simple: accurate knowledge? Many fears about sexual health do not begin with the body itself, they begin with uncertainty. When people don't have clear information, the mind starts filling the gaps with guesses, assumptions, and sometimes worst-case scenarios. Over time, those guesses can harden into beliefs that feel completely real, even if they are not supported by science. This is why knowledge can be so powerful. Imagine trying to navigate a new city without a map. Every street might feel confusing. Every turn might feel uncertain. You might constantly wonder if you're going in the wrong direction. But the moment you have a reliable map, the entire experience changes. The environment hasn't changed, your understanding of it has. The same thing happens when people begin learning accurate information about the human body. For example, many individuals grow up hearing jokes, rumors, or exaggerated stories about sexual health. Friends might repeat things they heard online. Movies and media often present dramatic or unrealistic portrayals. Over time, these messages blend together and start forming a mental picture of what is normal. But that picture is often incomplete or distorted. Scientific research works very differently from rumors or internet claims. Researchers gather large amounts of data, measure carefully, analyze patterns, and compare results across different populations. Their goal is not to create sensational headlines, but to understand reality as accurately as possible. And when people start looking at that research, something interesting happens. Many of the fears that once felt overwhelming begin to shrink. For instance, understanding how much natural variation exists in the human body can immediately change someone's perspective. Instead of believing there is one perfect standard that everyone must meet, they begin to see that biology operates within a wide and flexible range. Knowledge also helps people recognize misleading information. The internet is full of advertisements promising dramatic physical transformations. Products claim to permanently increase size, improve performance overnight, or deliver guaranteed results. Without scientific literacy, these claims can sound convincing. But when someone understands how clinical evidence works, they become much better at separating marketing from medicine. They start asking important questions. Where is the research behind this claim? Has it been tested in controlled studies? Do medical experts support it? Those questions create a powerful filter against misinformation. Knowledge also encourages healthier conversations. When people feel informed, they are often more comfortable discussing sexual health openly with healthcare professionals or trusted partners. This openness reduces stigma and allows individuals to address concerns with reliable guidance rather than relying on anonymous internet advice. Another benefit of knowledge is empowerment. Instead of feeling controlled by uncertainty or fear, people gain the ability to make decisions based on evidence. They understand what is normal, what might require medical attention, and what concerns are simply the result of cultural myths. That sense of clarity can be incredibly liberating. It allows individuals to move away from constant self-doubt and toward a more balanced understanding of their own bodies. Instead of worrying about whether they measure up to unrealistic expectations, they begin focusing on overall health, communication, and well-being.